A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Swarajya. You're watching Swarajya Conversations. My name is Sharan Sethi, your host. Every time you think that the Modi government has run out of surprises, that is exactly the point when they put out a surprise for you. There were many names that were making rounds in Delhi who would become the president, who would become the vice president. But finally, the Modi government sprung a surprise with Draupadi Murmu, and even more of a surprise with Jagdeep Dhankar as the vice president's nominee. I'm joined by Arjun Singh Kadian, who will be explaining the significance, the symbolism, and the reason behind Dhankar's nomination. Arjunji, a very good evening. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, Namaskar. Glad to get into a conversation with you, Sharan, as always.
The last time we had a conversation about around your book, it was a very lovely one, and most of the conversations with you are very impromptu, and I really look forward to this one as well. Uh, but Dhankar's nomination came as an absolute surprise. I mean, uh, because especially nobody discusses the vice president's elections that much as the president's elections is. At least that's at least an eye candy for many, so it goes around and then people talk about it, but not so much this time.
Absolutely. I believe yes. Vice presidential conversations around vice presidential elections are usually not picked up, but they're always there are political positions, and they are seen like that. Many a times, people tend to believe that they are those are sort of positions that the political parties dole out to loyalists and things like that. However, as I believe, all constitutional roles, be it of the governor, vice president, or the president, these are important roles. These are roles that signify continuity, signify stability, signify what the constitution represents, and signify what the country, as a whole is about. So not necessarily that vice presidential elections are not do not catch attention of people. There have been times vice presidential elections, have been critical and been talked about. Like you said, here as well, that when BJP, everybody thinks that BJP's ran out of surprising, Indians. BJP puts out another, item or news to cover, and look, voila, this is what happens. The entire country is talking about it. So we saw the same thing happen with President Draupadi Murmu as well. And congratulations, and it's a proud moment for us as a country also, primarily because one, that is, she's only the second woman president, and another being that she's the first tribal woman to become the president of the country. And what necessarily, and before we go on talking about the vice president, it's important what the her presidential candidature and then becoming a president elect signifies. It's that 75 years of Indian independence. Since 1950, we've been talking about it. We've been hearing that India together as one. Different communities, be it tribal communities, different caste and communities, what they represent, and all they represent is Bharat and India in totality. However, there's always, or there's much has to be done, but much more needs to be done as well in order to integrate and accommodate all the communities in India. Going by that, the president's election and having a tribal woman in the top office of the country is going to send across a very strong and very positive and very accommodating and integrating sign, and across India, for all the tribes, and so on and so forth. So yes, be it with President Murmu, and another thing is with now with President Vice President Dhankar.
No, it's true, and a lot of the calculations have been made that almost three-four of the northeastern states are going to polls very soon, within a year or less, and many of the states that are actually going to elections has a significant, sizable population of the ST votes. That will matter a lot to any political party going there, especially the BJP for that matter,
Mhm.
because the BJP has clearly made inroads into several of these essentially tribal states in the Northeast. And it just shows how important the community is, and it's more than symbolism right now. But as far as Jagdeep Dhankar is concerned, I think that was a complete surprise. Nobody was even expecting it. Uh, what do you think? What's your assessment behind BJP's move by pitching in Dhankar as the vice president's nominee?
Well, first, let me begin with the president's name as well. You made a point about it being, polls being considered, and what is the reflection it will have on polls in the coming, months or coming year. See, the president, it's a, I happen to speak to the former president and many of the people in the, who are in the circles. And it comes around that anybody who's elevated to that position has had a long life of, passionate service to the country. And may not be, politically, some may to be your liking, others may not be. Regardless, what is important is that these people have dedicated their life to service of the nation, and this is the stark difference between BJP's choice of presidents as well. Be it Sri Ramnath Kovind, he came in from. He is a man who actually came from absolute nothing. But if I'm right, if I've read right, then it's probably that he actually lost his mother when when the roof, it was a kacha home, the roof of their home fell, and she died out of asphyxiation. So think about that, and from there his journey from a rural village and a rural side of Kanpur Dehat to the high office is a journey. Same journey is for Draupadi ji as well, the president. Mahamahim now, the president-elect now, she started from absolute, those struggles, that life, that journey itself is telling of a lot. And regardless of polls and elections, it's important to see that what that person and the person's life represents for the larger country, and that's the right way to see it. And from there, let me just speak on what Dunker's choice as well. Of course, with the vice president, one could say that he represents Jats, and the Jat community is definitely proud of him for what he's done and what he's achieved in his life. But in terms of his choice as making him the vice presidential candidate has to do with a lot of work that he has done so far in his life. So, be it his legal career, be it his organizational work within BJP since early 2000s, is telling of a lot. And then taking on a challenger like, West Bengal Chief Minister, who absolutely understands, little of law other than her own scripted law, or rather unscripted law. So you've got a chief minister. In fact, if I remember right, there were a as soon as he became the chief, he became the governor. 3 or 4 months down the line, it was all vocal, it was loud, it was on media. The tiff that the governor was having with the chief minister of Bengal. In fact, that incident in Jadavpur University, where I believe one of the BJP MPs were out, and the chancellor is the usually the governor of the state, and he had to intervene, and he would also probably get out. It's telling of the state of anarchy that West Bengal was in, and we've seen that consistently through, through different campaigns. When Yuva Morcha did a campaign under Tejaswi's leadership, we saw, the protests, the police brutality that was shut down during those protests was telling of a lot and telling of what West Bengal was. And here's a man who comes from a you know agriculturist background. Then he studied law. Then he studied fought his way through up in his life, and he was a right contender for to oppose the West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee, because who else would do it if not a Jat, right? So, but yeah, that's how puns aside and jokes aside, it's important to see that the regardless of these elections, Mr. Dhankar is there or is a vice presidential nominee because of the merit of his work, and that begins from his early days as an advocate in Rajasthan High Court, then later as Supreme Court, Then he worked as a parliamentarian, a minister, a legislator, and then an organization man for the BJP. Another thing that I do want to highlight, is the fact that BJP, anybody who's worked close to, in any capacity with the Sangh Parivar or within the BJP, must understand this very clearly that the party and the organization Sangh Parivar works like a parivar. They work like a family. So there might be thousand names, there might be million names, but what it actually boils down to is the fact that who did the party or the organization or the Sangh, everybody stamp, the name of whoever, who is that one person that the party, gave support to, that the organization gave support to, that the Sangh gave support to, and
Right.
all of that converges into the fact that here we are. So yes, this is
No,
more
all in good humor, but those kind of statements can actually get you into a lot of trouble. Because
like.
do you remember the incident that happened with Ravindra Jadeja? I think he made a similar statement where he posed with a talwar and he said, "I'm proud to be a Rajput" or something. I'm not sure. And then he was criticized continuously in the media for 2 3 days.
See, imagine if I'm criticized like Ravindra Jadeja was probably, then I think that probably we're doing
You
something.
made it.
but but see, the point is, and I assert it again, that vice president nominee Thankar should be judged for his work, and that work he has done regardless of everything. Of course, I don't speak as a party spokesperson, but I do want to highlight the fact that party does this internal churn. There are conversations within the party, discussions within the party to decide who is going to be the next or vice president, and when that happens, they do ensure that all the communities find the right representation.
Right.
So that community representation is also very important, and that has happened, I believe. And then add to his work, add to his legacy, add to his ministerial and legislative career, and things like that. All that boiled down to and give him that elevation.
And there was a joke going around in Twitter that Mamata Banerjee and the TMC were so fed up of Jagdeep Thankar as a governor that they would be happy to actually vote for him. And at a point, it actually got serious where people were questioning if the TMC will actually vote for Thankar as the vice president. But finally, I think they abstained because of some reason. But do you read
No,
anything between the
but
lines?
it's a great point. No, it's a great point. What it actually is telling of is that the West Bengal governor during his tenure did not mince his words, was ready to take on the leadership, was ready to question the decisions, was ready to wrap officials, was ready to put, rather have the university officials or universities be run properly. So that's telling of a man that you wanted to put in the vice presidential office. So it's going to be good.
And do you think it also has to do with a lot of the characteristics that he represents as a person? Because, especially in the BJP, you've seen such people with unique leadership abilities, very good communicators, whether it's Manohar Parikar, Arun Jaitley ji, Sushma Swaraj. There's something very unique about each of these leaders that they represent. In spite of having an ideological commitment, in spite of having their own worldviews and values, they are still very friendly with the opposition parties. And I think this is something that was very much praised about Jagdeep Thankar, is that even though he might have uh, put a lot of checks and balances to the TMC's politics within the state, he still enjoyed conversations with Mamata Banerjee on a regular basis.
So see, that has to do with where he's coming from, and I say this very sincerely. Quite often, it happens that people who making modern commentaries or assessments about people tend to forget where they're coming from or fail to analyze where they're coming from. Here's a man who, in his young years, was active in, studied in Rajasthan, Junjunu district. That's where he's from. Um, and from that belt of Rajasthan, of course, there were conflicts, and we are talking about six seventies. Now, seventies in India was tumultuous time. So he's studying law, and he's seeing the emergency era. He's seeing the opposition to the emergency. He's seeing the Jayaprakash JJP movement. Later in the years, he sees the Janata Party, coming to power. So you see, in those formative years, quite as much in the age that modern 20s or 30 or early 30-year-old people are. In that phase, he was seeing all of that, and then he saw in the 80s there was just a lot happening in India. So he is a man who's coming from Rajasthan rural side, an agriculturist background, studies law, then starts work and from first from Rajasthan, and then getting into from Rajasthan State Assembly, getting into Rajasthan High Court, then getting into Supreme Court and practicing so on and so forth. So he's a man who's come from all of this to take on the challenge and take on those responsibilities. And as a lawyer, you tend to be good conversationalist. And then you've had career where you've been a member of parliament, you've been a minister. I mean, but late 80s or early 90s, he was a minister in the Chandrasekhar government as well. And this is the time he was also close to Tau Devilal. So you see, and this is the phase where it was the Janta Dal government in the 1989 when Tau Devilal, VP Singh, Chandrasekhar, you were three tall leaders who were always, not always particularly, but yes, they were in some sort of a political conflict with each other, although being in the same party, same union as such. But this is where this man is coming from. So you see agriculturist background, you see the legal background, you see the parliamentarian background, you see the ministerial background, then you see the legislative background, then you also see the laurels he's achieved while practicing in court. Then you see that he's done for the last 20 years easily now, man. Imagine it that this man has been working diligently for the party
Yeah.
in supporting in legal affairs and legal duties and legal cell. So all of that accumulates into this good impression where he's able to have
Yeah.
these great conversations, build this relationship with opposition parties as well, and that is what essentially the role demands. If he's a
Right.
governor, he has to listen to party in power and party in opposition as well, and all sorts, and that is what he has to
Yeah.
do in the vice presidential office as well.
This might be looking a bit too much into it, but do you think the BJP has taken a cue from the entire farm laws episode? Because, first of all, their strength in the Rajya Sabha is constantly challenged. And especially with stalwarts like Arun Jaitley and Manohar Parrikar unfortunately passing away, they're still struggling to have some sort of a firm affirmative identity in terms of this leadership in Rajya Sabha. And with the entire farm laws episode, do you think uh, a vice president like Dhankar would actually be able to control the entire podium very firmly? Because I think that's one of the speculation that he's a man who can actually capsulate the audience.
No, he's definitely a man who can captivate the audience, but that will be too much of a stretch asking or viewing him from that lens that it's in a response to farm laws. I remember a statement that the prime minister made that the farm laws were brought for किसानों के लिए लाए गए थे पर देश के लिए वापस ले रहा हूँ. Things
Hmm.
something on those lines. It's telling of what the laws as well as what this the role that the vice president is getting himself into. It's larger and much beyond that. But definitely when it comes to Jat votes in particular, there are definitely people who are proud of his achievements. In fact, I remember. See, at the same time, it's important and critical for you to understand that Jats as a community. Yesterday morning, I was speaking to a designer who's done very well for herself and is winning laurels all across. She said that it's very tough. Jats don't get together. The community does not get together in terms of supporting each other or for political reasons. Also, all those things. Yeah, at the same time, later in the evening, I was speaking to some senior bureaucrats who made a comment like that, the community is genuinely proud of what Dhankar has achieved and where he is going to sit now. So it will be too narrow to see it on caste or community lines, but definitely it will have some impact. So yes.
Do tell us how this fits into the entire Jat politics equation, and I think you'll be only able to tell us how exactly the vote bank politics, especially in the Jat community, actually works, and we'll probably conclude with that.
Yes. So post independence, Jats wanted a larger state which was Jat dominated, Mahadelhi or Greater Haryana. different names were proposed for it. Jat votes concentration essentially is in the western Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and northern and the Rajasthan, eastern Rajasthan. Rajasthan definitely, be it in Rajasthan, Haryana, and West UP, Jat votes are pretty dominant. And then in Rajasthan area, Jats end up, there was a survey report a decade ago, which said something like, an index was created which said something like that Jats are, the most impacting in terms of voters. They'll have the maximum impact. Something similar is for Haryana as well. In Haryana, easily there are around close to 40 seats where Jat votes impact much. But and then in Western UP also. Then Western UP politically, Jats may be pitched against Muslims. Rajasthan has its own dynamics. Haryana has its own dynamics. Haryana, it's a Jat versus non-Jat politics in the state, commonly told. However, seeing from BJP's side and BJP's way of working, the party wants to ensure, and this is a well justified and well represented and well positioned thing, and this is a line of thought that the party has worked consistently on. That regardless of the caste politics aside, it's important that the party brings in adequate representation from different castes and communities. So, in terms of representation, while people might say, and there are comments that people made and articles written that there's no Jat cabinet minister. Here's a vice president who's a Jat by caste. So definitely that is going to have an impact, a sense of positivity, a sense of optimism in relation to the BJP. But regardless, another thing is, and this has to be studied with nuance, uh, and must give me a little bit of time space to try explaining it. See, Jats are a dominant community in the region, and as a consequence, they fail to, or at times fail to come together for a cause or for political reasons because they're always in turf war against each other, and they're also a tribal clanal system. So, so a Jat of a certain Gotra might be, if not raising up arms against the other Gotra, but is always in some sort of a conflict, and that needs to change because, and I say this in my book also, and I'm able to talk about this because I'm working on a second, book on Haryana where I'm discussing this caste politics as well. Uh,
Yeah.
how how communities need to see beyond their caste identities. It is important that people appreciate their Haryanvi identity. It's important that people all across India appreciate their Indian identity rather than being fixated into caste community lines. Although it's a longer conversation where we can talk about.
But do you think that cohesion exists today, or at least is on its way to becoming one?
Well, as societies progress, that cohesion has to, naturally it should happen. The pace may be slow or fast. The priorities may at times change because that is how societies work. No, societies work where discussions, deliberations. The societies work how organizations and institutions like RSS work. You're always in conversation, in discussion of what is changing, what is coming around, what might happen if this something happens. So that those conversations are definitely going on within the society. uh, but it's important that, regardless, and I'm not talking about just Jats here, I'm talking about all communities in Haryana. Even say Punjabis. So Punjabis were essentially Khatris, or merchants who came from the Punjab side or the Pakistan side of Punjab. So even when they made Haryana their home, they should not be, it's three generations of family who lived in Haryana. Might as well, or proudly call yourself or call oneself Haryanvi. And the blame can be put on so multiple sides. Like it's just not Punjabis to blame for it. It's the locals, the Haryanvis also to blame for it, or the Jats to blame for it, or other people to blame for it, who probably should have accommodated more. Regardless of that, what I'm talking about here is that it's important to see, one, the vice presidential office, two, what it means beyond the caste community lines. Definitely, it has some impression because the party wants to ensure that the caste is represented or the community is represented. But
Right.
but that's how the party works. That's how BJP works. That's how Sangh Parivar works. But at the same time, politically seen, it's definitely going to have an impact, a sense of optimism. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Arjun, for joining us today. And viewers, please do. I'll share a link in the description to Arjun's book. It's called The Story of Haryana, Land of the Gods. Arjun, do you want to make a pitch now, or we'll do an exclusive session later on? You can do both actually.
Okay. So I'll make a pitch right here. I'll say, do read my book, Land of the Gods, the story of Haryana. It's published by Rupa Publications, and it touches upon different, different aspects of the region and the state, be it from social angle, political angle, historical angle, and definitely, I'd like to get into a longer conversation to get talk about the book. For now, I think Mr. Dunkard, deserves this entire 15-20 minutes of conversation. So yes,
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
thank you very much.